Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Basketball PH podcast. Enjoy the show.
What is up, mga paps? This is your fantasy papi, Papi Roy, and we are going to do an English content for today's episode. So this is one of those FBPH special episodes wherein, we're gonna talk about or we're gonna discuss something that we don't usually do in our regular content, and usually we have a special guest because it's a special episode. So I'm pretty sure you know this special guest that we have. Because if you don't, it just means that you're kind of like new in the fantasy world. Um, I'm just gonna give a couple of clues, but let me just shout out hoop ball and fantasy NBA today because our guest today is actually someone who is manning the podcast of Fantasy NBA today, and also uh, under the Twitter account of at Dan Besbris, and he is actually one of you know the one to follow in terms of fantasy basketball in hoopball at Twitter. They have a lot of good writer stuff and fantasy sports analysts there, but Dan has this kind of like a very infamous team that he has, which we are going to talk about today. And without further ado, let me put in our main guest of the evening, Dan Besbris.
Welcome to Welcome to Fantasy Basketball PH.
What's up, Dan?
Wow, what a welcome! The children love it. That's the most important part. What's happening, Poppy? It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be with you as well. I know it was a long shot because you've been busy all week long doing some buckets.
Yeah, I've been busy with the buckets. I mean, life has been complicated these days, but it is. Yeah, I mean, it's a very weird hour for you right now. So I don't know what to say other than you're a hero. And you managed to do this on my very weird and narrow calendar. So thank you for having me in not only just whenever, but in this narrow pocket where it actually works.
Yeah, I mean, this is for the love of fantasy basketball, of course. And for the Filipino fans that we have started our community here in the country. And then it's been growing since last year when I started this podcast. So I'm pretty hyped to really, once they get to know you. And because there's a lot of new members there that might not be even familiar that we exist, right? So um, at least they start off very strong by knowing and following you and your takes in fantasy basketball.
Well, yeah, I mean that whatever I can do is great. If you, I try to put out as much content as humanly possible, whatever time will allow, and if folks are feeling like dropping a follow on Twitter, I'm always happy to take it. I didn't think that I was going to get kind of addicted to watching the numbers either climb up or down on that, but here we are. I am, and I'd love to grab a few new follows, and I'd love to meet some new people out of it. So that would just be a side bonus. I'm excited to talk about fantasy basketball. Anything else that comes of it is just gravy.
For sure, for sure. But before we do that, can you just briefly um, tell a quick story, a couple of sentences, wherein how did you really start doing fantasy basketball?
It's funny. I'm so used to being on the other side where I'm asking everybody else for their origin stories, for their, their Marvel one-off movies, that I don't get to tell my own very much. And it's not super exciting. I got into fantasy basketball my freshman year of college, which was 2001. That was on CBSSportsline.com. It was, Yahoo didn't really have a big platform yet. ESPN had only just barely cracked into it. And the thing that was really nice about CBS at that point was that they allowed you to make team names of as many characters as you wanted. It wasn't limited by, 15, 25, whatever it is nowadays, where you have to sort of condense everything down. So we all had these team names that were like 7, 8 words long, and it was nuts. It was all points leagues at that point. They weren't broken down by category. I remember having an aging Scottie Pippen on my team, and I was kind of hooked. We switched over to Yahoo, I think, the following year when CBS started charging money to have a league on their website because they hadn't figured out the whole, like, throw an ad on the side of your page element yet. And I've never looked back. My friends, my colleagues, I guess they were just my roommates at that point, they all hated playing with me because I had figured out the art of the 2-for-1 trade way before anybody else. And I was just constantly fleecing everyone in the league, and no one could figure out how I ended up with this pile of superstars. Fast forward to 2016. I'd been working as a broadcaster for a long time in there, playing fantasy, a number of leagues kind of on the side, when Aaron Bruski moved from Roto World to founding Hoopball. And I sent him an email out of the blue because he was recruiting on Twitter at that point, just saying, hey, I'd love to get into fantasy sports. I think I'm really good at it. I think I'm pretty analytical about all of this stuff. And my day job is probably evaporating here in the not too distant future. And he actually kind of put me behind the scenes. He taught me how to write blurbs, run the Hoopball fantasy Twitter feed. And then somewhere along like the first 3 or 4 weeks of that, he goes, you know what? You never told me what you actually do. And I said, oh, I'm a sports broadcaster. And he goes, how about we start a broadcast division at Hoopball? I was like, that's a great idea. And that's how Fantasy NBA today came about. So that's my super uneventful origin story. I like winning. I like spending a lot of time watching basketball. I think that for full season fantasy, the power of really immersing yourself in games every day, get league pass, watch the players that you care about. Don't watch the superstars. They're going to do their stuff. They're not changing much. You can get their information from box scores, from rank charts, and you can do your very simple mean reversion type analysis on the key guys. You know where they're going to end up. The guys you need to be focusing on as you're watching this stuff are the fringe players, the ones that are about to make the leap forward or backward, anybody you have questions about. And that, to me, is where you can really make giant leaps mid-season. And I think it's part of why, and I know we're going to talk about, I see you threw it up on the screen there, my old man team on draft day is so successful because you supplement that, a very safe, pretty safe draft compared to most fantasy analysts, I think, with very aggressive in-season activity. You're going to win.
Excellent. It's not uneventful as you think, Dan, because there's a lot of stuff happening there. It's amazing how how you're passionate about the sports in general, the basketball in general, intertwined with your hobby, and then you met Aaron Bruski. That's actually eventful for me.
I guess the lesson there is take your shot.
Yeah,
I didn't know he was going to write back.
I also didn't know you were gonna write back, so yeah.
See, two lessons today on one show, but they all come to the same point. Shoot your shot. Worst thing that happens is somebody either says no or doesn't write back.
Exactly. And just to piggyback on that, actually, one of our followers named Papi Glenn wanted to ask, who was your favorite fantasy player of all time?
Oh boy. It's probably Josh Smith. He was such a polarizing fantasy player, but because I kind of grew up, my first few years in fantasy were more on that points league side of the ledger. I didn't care that in 2007 he shot 44. I had to look this up, by the way. I don't know this off the top of my head. He shot 44% from the field and 69% at the free throw line because most leagues were points leagues at that point. But he averaged 16.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.4 steals, and 2.9 blocks that year. 4.3 combined defensive stats. And when you had the little, steals are worth 2.5 points, blocks are worth 4 points, or whatever they were 15 years ago, he was a monster. He was an absolute monster, and people always overlooked him because he didn't score 25 points a game. So I know it's a weird choice. He's not a superstar, but I think it was Josh Smith, because I always kind of ended up with him on my team in the late 2000s range, like 2006 to 2010, 11. And no one could figure out how I ended up with him every year, because that was how I 2-for-1 traded my way 3, 4, 5 trades down the line, and I always ended up with Josh Smith. And even once you switched over to category leagues, if you could cover up for his percentages issues, his other stuff was so insane that he could win you blocks and steals on a given week. So no superstar for me. It was Josh Smith.
And I'm actually checking Josh Smith's stats, and
They're
it
crazy.
really seems you and it really seems he's your favorite player, because you're on point. In 2006 to 2007, he averaged 16.4 points with 2.9 blocks, 1.4 steals, 3.4 assists, and around 8 rebounds. So that is
Yep.
big in fantasy.
Yeah, and I don't mean to jump on your toes at all, but a couple years later, he actually fixed his field goal percentage issue and got that into the 48, 49, 50 range. So free throws were really the only mess for him. And, I love percentages. I hate drafting guys that stink at the free throw line, but when they're getting you almost 4 defensive stats a ball game, and free throw is the only thing they're not good at, you're talking about like an Andre Drummond who also was passing basically at that point and scoring a bit at that point. It was the game was different. The fact that he didn't take 3-pointers in 2008 or 2009, it didn't matter, because there were like 8 guys in the NBA that shot the 3 ball. You just went and you got one of those dudes and you were fine at it. It's such a different game now. Josh Smith making 0.4 threes a game today with bad percentages, he wouldn't even be in my top 30 or 40 guys, but admit, like, he would probably have evolved, and he was making a 3-pointer by the end of his career. I just, thinking back, just throwing my brain back to who do I remember having on my team all the time the first few years I played fantasy, it was Josh Smith.
Nice. Jace Move, as we call him, right?
That's right.
I remember how strong he was back in the Atlanta period, right? Yeah. So that's how you know that Dan really knows his old man squad, right? Because we're talking about
Yeah.
Jace Move.
That's right. He had that old man game even 15 years ago. Didn't score a ton, but did everything else, apparently, except shooting free throws. But whatever. He only took like 3 or 4 a game anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So without further ado, again, since we've kind of like broken down the logic behind that old man team or old man squad, the topic for today is I'm gonna list out several names here. So I'm gonna let you choose which one would you like. Just give me any takes, and then let me try to you know play against you, and just to kind of like try my best to defend whoever who you won't pick. Okay,
That's
so
fine. Yeah.
first,
Play a little devil's advocate. I'm ready.
yeah. So again, for everyone's knowledge, all of these players are more than 30 years old. So I know how you love Tobias Harris, but well,
I
he
do.
still has a couple of years to be
I
in this
can't even
list.
believe that that's true. That's like when I found out Harrison Barnes wasn't 39 years old. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and then we all thought that Serge Ibaka is like 40 years old, but
Yeah,
apparently
he's like 28.
okay. So first off, this is from the top tier squad. Let's I'll let you choose between Curry, which is 32 years old, and Harden, which is 31 years old. This is gonna be. I know in some sense there's a clear winner here, but I'll let you do your take in between these two guys.
So are we, I guess my initial question is, are we going 8 cat or 9 cat here? I know I'm much more familiar with 9, but I'll go with whatever direction you'd like to go.
Yeah, I think let's do 9 cat, because that's at least in our country, majority of the leagues here are standard 9 cat.
Excellent. Well, that makes me feel very comfortable. So 9 cat, it's Steph for me in a runaway in this first choice. He's going to have to play a larger role on his team than Harden's going to have to in Brooklyn. We didn't really get to see a ton of Harden with both Kyrie and KD in the lineup. There were a few games in there, and the numbers are still going to be very good for James. He adjusted his game to do a lot more passing. We saw the assists at 11 last year. But everything screams Harden with a very slight downward arrow. Whether it's the rule changes, does that impact his free throw shooting at all? Or just the simple fact that he's not going to have to do as much on a night-to-night basis. He's not going to have to play 37 minutes a game this year, and I don't think they want him to. Where on the other side, yes, the Warriors are going to get Klay Thompson back at some point this season, but it sounds like the target is Christmas, which is still 2 months into the fantasy season, which means for 2 months out of the 6, it's still kind of Steph against the world. So even if those guys play even the last 4 months of the year, Steph is going to have to do more the first 2. I think he does more the entire year because I don't know what we're going to get exactly out of Klay. But for me, this one is Steph kind of in a runaway. He was basically the number 1 player in fantasy from mid-February or so, maybe All-Star break on this last season. And there's no reason for him to slow down because they really don't want to be in that play-in game again. So give me Steph on this one, and I'll stop myself from talking.
Let me think of something that could.
If you agree with me, we can go to the next one.
Well, I definitely agree with you, but probably something that I would add in terms of James Harden's upside. He's been the number 1 fantasy player for quite some time, arguably, especially in 9 cats. And something that I'm thinking is at least Harden has an upside just in case Kyrie or KD went down. Currently, with that situation, he's already in the at least at most top 7 or 6, arguably top 5, right? What if KD and Harden goes down? So that definitely goes up. And I'm gonna also point out how important assist is in the early rounds. I guess it's something that Harden will definitely help you out, as well as those free throws made that influences the free throw percentage. So
yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, like, just looking at the 10 faces you have on the screen right now, like Harden would easily be in the top 3, probably the second guy I would take of any of these dudes on the screen. But you happen to put him against the guy I would very much
for sure. Next up, this is in a sense this is gonna be trickier than the first one. It's the difference between these 2 guys, Damian Lillard and KD, is when healthy. I think KD is arguably can be your number 1 guy, and he has been for several years during his heydays. But now it's still questionable if he can do that. So would you rather have Damian Lillard's sort of like Iron Man image over KD's? I think he could be arguably the best skilled player as of the moment, reality and fantasy, with his performance during the playoffs and in the Olympic game. How do you think? Would you rather have him or Damian Lillard?
So this is a really good question, and I would compare it a little bit to not this most recent season, but the previous one that got shut down in March, where first of all, Dame had an unreal year that year. So using Dame in this example is actually a bad idea. But the guy I want to pluck from not this season, but the previous one, or even frankly, I guess we could use him this one, is a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who this year missed 20 basketball games. But the previous season, he only missed, I think, 15 out of their 72. A guy like Kawhi, and this year, a guy like Kevin Durant, you go into the season knowing that they're not playing more than 69 out of 82 games. That's basically the upper limit. You can carve out 12 or 13 games. With Dame, he's not going to get to 82, but 82 is the upper limit. There's no game on the board where Portland is pointing at it and going, this is a game we're going to give Lillard the night off. And I can guarantee that Brooklyn has already done that. Their medical staff has already taken the schedule and said, okay, KD, we'd like to rest him here, 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 and here. How does that balance out at the end of the season? I'm someone who, in the first round, strongly believes that you can lose your season by having someone in the first round that ends up as a massive dud. You cannot win your league in the first round. Presumably, you're picking between Dame and KD, probably around like pick 5 or 6 in the draft this year, somewhere in that neck of the woods. If you take KD, a best case scenario is he plays about 70 ball games and is a top 3, maybe top 2 player, which is very good. But because he's going to be ever so slightly sub-league average in games played, or in a best case scenario right on that mark, it's not like he's going to run away with it. It's not going to be like Jokic this year, who was just so far beyond everyone because not only was he good, but he was durable. Dame will probably have to play 4 or 5 games more than KD for them to hit the same mark in totals at the end of the year. I think he does, and I'd rather not take the risk that Durant gets hurt, pulls a hammy, whatever, and misses an extra 3 or 4 weeks and sinks my team. So I lean to Dame, if only because as tantalizing as KD's upside is, I can't risk sinking my team in the first round if something goes wrong.
And I would definitely agree with that. At least not for this season. Maybe one more season that KD shows he's actually healthy, uh, and maybe Brooklyn is that confident enough to really, play him more. Especially that what if Brooklyn blows every team in every game? That really,
That's a great point. So with Brooklyn, they're gonna easily be a top 3 team in the East, playing 2 of their 3 superstars this year. They have no reason at all to push their guys hard in the regular season. Portland is going to be in that same dogfight they always are to land between 8 and 3. They have to play their guy. So yeah, I got to go with the durability on this one in the first round. I mean, if you ask me a similar question about a guy in like the 4th round where there's an upside injury prone guy against the durable one, I might lean to the injury guy, but not in the first. I can't go that way this early.
Yeah, that's a must in any formats actually, especially this few seasons, because we all know the impact of having that injured player. Even those instances wherein the likes of Kyrie goes away and really hits your week.
Yep.
If you're playing head to head, it's gonna hurt a lot.
And I know I gotta do a better job of consolidating my thoughts here. I'll move a little quicker. You don't have to tell me.
Yeah, sure. And then this next one is for me is I really like this matchup because it's both are um kind of like had this history that, especially last season wherein they really didn't play much. Would you rather have Jimmy Butler or LeBron James?
Butler, and it's not close. LeBron James is almost my age, which tells you all you need to know about how much he wants to do during the regular season. LeBron was number 34 in 9-cap by averages last year. Jimmy Butler was number 5. They were 3 rounds apart almost. Give me Butler. I think they play about the same number of games this year, and one of those 2 guys has a whopping set of issues with his fantasy game. LeBron, very high turnovers, very poor free throw percent. Just brought on Russell Westbrook to take on more of the offensive playmaking load. Yeah, I know the Heat brought in Kyle Lowry. Does that put a small dent into Jimmy? I guess. But efficiency-wise, he's a monster. He was the best steals guy in the league last season. This one's not close for me. I'm on Team Jimmy here.
Actually, me too. Especially that Jimmy has really upped his dimes for the past seasons. That for me is an additional stat that Jimmy gives his GMs, especially that it's kind of like an out of position stat that you get, and getting that additional assist early in the draft will definitely help you out. Okay, I think this one is also probably a runaway, but
Yeah, it is.
would you rather have PG-13 and Vucevic? But I guess you having that kind of like background and knowing the stats will definitely helps you out. But in reality, a regular GM, probably not even a kind of like stat geek, would really might pick Vucevic just because people hate PG-13.
Yeah, if Kawhi was healthy, this would be, I think, a really close one because Vooch was number 11 last year per game. He was very durable, better than Paul George in that respect. But Vooch now with Zach LaVine full time, with DeMar DeRozan full time, Paul George with, I mean, who is really the number 2 usage guy on the Clippers this year? Is it Reggie Jackson? So Paul's going to be getting a lot of shots, and he could very easily, even if he doesn't play in more than 70 games, he could be a mid first rounder on a per game basis, kind of a la his season in Oklahoma City with Russ. You got to go Paul George here just for the sheer ridiculous upside. And Vooch does, I think, take a small step backward. He might still get underdrafted, by the way. Like I think you probably see Paul George getting drafted well ahead of Vooch, and he might be going up against maybe the next 2 guys you got on the list, where you're like, oh, okay, this is Vooch, Drew, Chris Paul. I don't mean to get ahead of you here. Those are 3 guys you might be picking from like near the end of the second round in your draft. That's a pretty good debate right there.
Yeah, I do agree. Well, at least in Yahoo right now, they are actually undervaluing PG-13 as of the moment. So if you're drafting right now, you'll definitely get a bang for your bucks in getting a
Nice.
PG-13. And well, you've already mentioned CP3, which is kind of like someone that really always shocks us since his OKC days. Would you believe that this season won't be that season that he kind of like slows down, or would you rather have a Drew Holiday that is a very, very rock solid point guard, both offense and defense?
So I'm going to actually combine all 3 of those guys at the end there. I'm going to throw Vooch into this little head-to-head thing going on. And I can't, I'd like to make my thoughts super brief here, but this one might take just a tiny bit longer. So with CP3, I have to knock him a little bit down my board because of the deep finals run last year. And because the Suns kind of proved during the regular season that they're a solid team now. So this is the year where they don't need to push him as hard. This last season, it was, we need you in every ball game. We got to keep, every day was an opportunity to kind of whip the team into shape and build chemistry and teach guys how to win together. So I don't think Chris Paul plays. I mean, he's missed what, 4 or 5 games over the last 2 seasons combined now. I don't think that happens this year. He probably still gets underdrafted by a little bit, but it's not going to be that absurd profit margin we had each of the last 2 seasons. Drew Holiday also went to the finals, played in the Olympic Games right after that. He's another guy that I think we need to move down the board just a little bit because of workload. Vooch probably actually would be my favorite of those 3 guys if we put them together. Then Chris Paul and then Drew Holiday, if only because I don't know that I fully trust Drew to go 50% from the field and 79 at the free throw line again this coming year. And he's probably going to miss some 12, 13 ball games because that's what he did this last season. So presumably that happens to him again. Chris Paul misses a few more games. Vooch, he's playing this year because the Bulls they are the team with something to prove. And even though I think his per game numbers take a step back, I think you see him play through more nagging injuries than the other 2 guys here. So if I was going to rank those 3, it'd be Vooch, Chris Paul, and then Drew Holiday.
Yeah, and another reason that I would also pick Vooch among the 3 would be getting that solid center that doesn't have that deficiency in terms of percentages, at least. Because the next following centers in the upcoming rounds, at least for what Yahoo has right now, is it's either have low free throw percentage or doesn't block. So at least you have Vooch who scores and does it every big man stat with better efficiency and better lesser turnovers. Okay, let me just quickly send this one. I guess we're gonna be a little bit uh pushing it faster right now.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And then you're in the middle of the night over there.
No worries. I was actually thinking about your time as well. But this one,
I
this is a
talk too much.
battle of.
I'm gonna do better. I'm ready. Lightning. Hit me with the lightning round. I got this.
Okay, so both of these guys are known to be deficient in some stats, But would you rather have someone who doesn't score more or someone who doesn't do defensive stats more? So I'm talking about DeMar DeRozan versus the Draymond Green.
I like Draymond Green here. I think DeMar takes about a round, maybe a round and a half step backwards in its transition to Chicago, which moves him from more the 40s range kind of guy, maybe to more like the 60s. After a slow start last year, Draymond was basically neck and neck with DeMar. They were both in the 40 range for the last half of the season. And Draymond is just going to get better as the Warriors add more useful pieces back. I mean, he's better with Klay Thompson next to him than Kelly Oubre because he doesn't want to shoot. He wants to pass. He wants to rebound. He wants to get steals, block shots. And they know they need to do more this season than they did last year because they got wiped out in the play-in stuff, which I think was embarrassing for them. They figured they were going to be better than that. So give me Dre. I think he's got a little bit of more of a fire in his belly, much as I like the Bulls. As I just mentioned, a team that's going to be pushing for the playoffs as well. DeMar's just not going to have to do as much. So I'll take Dre there.
And I also like Dre here. And just to add, like with what you mentioned, the more the moment that Klay Thompson comes in, I think Dre will play better because actually Draymond plays better every time he plays with better player as well. So it's something that I noticed in the glory years of the Golden State Warriors. And then let's now talk about these two guys who started last season differently. Gordon Hayward started very strong, and then Robert Covington, on the other hand, started very, very poor. So, would you rather have Gordon Hayward or Bob Cov?
This might surprise some people. I'm going Hayward on this one. I know everybody knows that I love Rob Covington.
Yeah,
But, Portland's coming into the year healthy again. A lot of his damage was done when guys were out. That allowed him to sort of find his form with that team. But he is not going to play any center with the Blazers again this year. And that was one of the reasons he was so unbelievably successful in Houston, was when he was playing small ball 5. He's a 3 and a 4 with the Blazers starting power forward. Larry Nance puts a tiny bit of a squeeze on that. I don't think he's going to lose any playing time, but he just doesn't get any shots at all. And, I don't care about points, but a lot of his value was in 3-pointers in addition to the defensive stats. So if one of those 3 things goes away, it does hurt him a little bit. I think Rob Covington's probably a top 65, top 70 type of guy. More durable than Gordon Hayward, for sure. But on a per-game basis, I got to believe Hayward beats him out of the water as more of a top 50 kind of guy. And this is now a part of a draft where I would prefer to roll the dice and hope that Gordon plays, 65 to 75 games as opposed to missing half a season, as opposed to someone like Covington where you're like, look, I'm probably going to get 75 games out of him, but I'm in a games cap roto format or whatever. I can cover up for the guy who misses a few more games. And if Hayward stays healthy, then he absolutely dominates this matchup.
yeah. For this one, the reason why I might pick Covington over Hayward, not actually over, probably just because of the value that they have. So if you check out the current positions right now, especially in Yahoo, in the area that Covington is in right now, it's actually a value pick because at that state, there's like the next center that you could actually add would be Jakob Pertl. So there's quite of like a difference there. So probably that's the reason why I love Robert Covington in that part. But head to head wise, I would also agree in getting a high upside Gordon Hayward on that run. Okay. 2 new members for 2 new teams. Russell Westbrook versus Kyle Lowry.
This is a good one. This might be the hardest one you've thrown me so far. Lowry strikes me as a guy who's sort of in the sunset of his career. His numbers have been coming down. Russ had a brilliant, actually, second half of last year that, we like to clown on Russ in his fantasy game, but he was actually really good last 2 months last season. But alongside LeBron and AD, there's just not enough for him to float his deficiencies with monster scoring, rebounding, assists, steals, threes, that kind of stuff. The step back he takes there in usage is going to overwhelm his fantasy value. So I got to go Kyle Lowry just because I think his game translates a bit easier to a new setting. Jimmy Butler's the lead horse on that Heat team, but Lowry can still orchestrate an offense. They'll stagger their minutes some. He'll get his 3-pointers. He'll get his assists. I mean, Lowry only took, I'm not looking this up, but I think he only took like 12 and a half shots a game last year. So he doesn't need to be chucking away to get to his marks. So I'll go Kyle Lowry, and I will cross my fingers and my toes and, sacrifice a donkey or whatever it takes to keep him on the floor for an entire season. But I'll go Lowry in this matchup.
Yeah, the only possible reason that I'll be drafting Russell Westbrook is if I'm punting several categories here.
Yeah, like a third of categories.
Yeah. Okay. This one, this is interesting for me because both players has their prime season during when they were younger, but currently right now, who would have that a better comeback season? Would it be John Wall? I doubt because of his situation at Houston Rockets. But Kemba Walker may be a runaway, but I'm not. To be honest, I just don't trust his injuries for the past season. So that's the reason why I find this one interesting.
This is going to be the race to who can actually get to 60 out of 82 ball games this year. And I really don't know if either guy gets there, but if either one's going to, it's going to be the guy on the team that's trying to win. So give me Kemba. His fantasy game translates better to 9 category because John Wall is just a disaster in both percentages and turnovers. We just talked about Russ. John Wall is like a far worse version of that same stuff. And at least with Kemba, it's a very good foul shooter, good 3-point guy, scores well. He doesn't hurt you in nearly as many categories. It's basically just field goal percent on the Kemba side. I'm assuming he's going to play enough minutes to sort of inch his way to around a steal per game. So that keeps it from being a net negative for him. I wouldn't be surprised if John Wall played like 55 games this year and was outside the top 150. So Kemba in a landslide for yours truly, even though he might not play 60 games himself.
Yeah, and something to add on that, when Tom Thibodeau was interviewed, he was kind of like very serious about telling the reporters that he'll be playing a lot of Kemba big minutes.
Good
So
luck, man. Oh boy.
Good luck to the niece of Kemba and Derrick Rose. So
yeah, they're not making it through the season unscathed. And Julius Randle worries me a bit there too, because he played like every minute of every game last year.
yeah,
That catches up with you, as we saw with Cat. He played He played every game for 3 straight years under Tibbs, and then all of a sudden, can't do it forever.
Speaking of,
you found me some old ones for this one.
Yeah, and then also for this next matchup, they actually had their limelight last season. There are several weeks wherein both Al Horford and Tad Young is a super solid free agent if you wasn't able to really draft them. So would you rather have Al Horford now and Tad Young? Well, depending if Tad Young stays in Spurs or Phoenix finds a way to get him.
I think I got to go Big Al because at least his role is safe at the moment. We don't really know what Thad Young is up to. Everybody knows I've been a massive Thad Young fan for a long time. As a power forward who gets you a ton of steals, great field goal percent, and then last year turned into this assist master. I don't know where the heck that came from. But Al Horford's the starting center for the Celtics. It's a place he's familiar, a team that wanted him back. He makes them a lot better because of his knowledge of positional defense. The Time Lord's still going to play as his backup, so Big Al's not going to get 32 minutes a game, but 27-ish, something in that neck of the woods is, I think, a reasonable target, 26, 27. And that pretty much guarantees him an inside the top 90 kind of finish, if maybe a little bit better than that. With Thad, we just don't know. There's too much confusion there. So I got to go Horford on this one. And at the moment, I don't think I'm drafting Thad Young. He's someone I would be just keeping a very close watch on as maybe the first roster move I make during the season is watch the first half of the first game of the year on whatever team Thad Young is on and see, does he play 13 minutes in the first half? Because if he's on pace to play 26 minutes in the game, you add him. But right now, I actually don't know that he's going to get that.
but my question here for you, Dan, is do you think Tad Young would have a better fantasy season with the Spurs or with the Phoenix Suns?
Spurs.
Yeah.
Spurs.
I also would agree on that, especially how shallow Spurs are right now, and especially Tad Young could also play a center. So the deficiency that Jakob Pertl has in terms of the offensive side and the playmaking role covers that for Tad Young. Okay, so let me chime in. Well, set of older ones.
This is fun because this is also like for viewers, this is a do you recognize these players
Yeah.
segment of the show.
So this I made a match for these two centers right now because Mason Plumlee did a really great job last season. Surprised a lot, but I believe you're not one of them because you've been you already saw the value there and in the Detroit Pistons. But Serge Ibaka could actually play well without Kawhi right now. Maybe this is an opportunity wherein he could revive those solid stats. Unfortunately, not the blocks. He actually kind of like upped his 3-point game instead of upping the defensive side. So would you rather have Mason Plumlee or Serge Ibaka?
So I don't mean to steer the boat at all, but I am extraordinarily short on time. Do you mind if I do all 5 in a row?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay, so give me Plumlee in the first one. Give me Nick, and I'm going to give reasoning on each of these in a second. Give me Nick Batum in the second matchup over Will Barton. I will take Joe Ingles over Ricky Rubio in the third matchup, although I'll admit that one's probably the closest of all 5. Reggie Jackson in the fourth, and Brook Lopez in the fifth. Reggie Jackson is over Seth Curry, and Brook Lopez, I think that's Marcus Morris. Little tiny Marcus Morris there.
Yeah.
So here's why on each of those. First one, we just don't really know if Serge Ibaka is ever going to be truly healthy again. It sounds like he's dealing with some serious nerve stuff that is going to probably limit him to low 20s in minutes, I would assume, the rest of his NBA career. Where with Plumlee, there's also a big question mark on what he's going to get to do with Charlotte, but the Hornets are small. If it's not him, it's PJ Washington at center, and he can do some stuff. He's versatile, but they're not stopping anyone, and they're not rebounding unless they get Plumlee in there. He's a pretty good passer too. So nice job of facilitating. It messes up the flow on offense in terms of spacing, but I think he's going to get to do a fair amount. In all likelihood, neither one of these guys ends up with top 100 value this year, but I would lean Plumlee just in case something kind of swings his way. In the second one, you got to go Batum, because before Marcus Morris, who's also featured on this page, before he came back last year, Batum was a top 70 player for the Clippers, and that was with Kawhi Leonard in the lineup. So now Kawhi out, Morris is still in. There's a lot. That's a usage bump for everybody on the Clippers. Not that that's really what Batum needs, but he is a facilitator on that club, along with Paul George and Reggie Jackson. Those are kind of the three guys that can actually help create a little bit, help orchestrate. Batum is a very good point forward, just setting up an offense. I think there's some interesting upside for him in terms of percentages and assists this year. And if he can keep the 3-point shot dropping the way he did, that's really nice. With Will Barton, just like, not to pick on him too much, his fantasy game has fallen into the toilet. I don't know what the hell happened there, but his percentages are garbage all of a sudden. Even with Jamal Murray out at the end of last year, he still wasn't very good. He had these flashes, 2-3 weeks where he was a top 60 guy, and then immediately fell back to the top 200. So I'll pass on that experience. I'm going to come back to the third one, actually, because that was the hardest one for these for me. Fourth one, Seth Curry. I like his game, efficient, but there's no upside there. So, like, head-to-head leagues, I guess, if you thought he was going to play all 82 games, he'd be a nice guy to have at the very end of your bench. It's going to give you 2+ 3-pointers a game on good percentages, and he'll sort of rack up stuff all season long. But if he's inside the top 100 per game, I'd be flabbergasted. And at least with Reggie Jackson, whose fantasy game does have issues, he's much more well-suited to points formats because he's a score-first kind of guard. He's going to be asked to do a fair amount on the Clippers this year. So I think you have to roll the dice on, because these are late-round grabs now, roll the dice on the guy who might be worth something, a guy who might be able to kind of push that boulder forward, to use an analogy I've talked about on my own show. And then the last one, it has to be Brook Lopez. I like Marcus Morris with no Kawhi out, just in terms of him having a little bit more opportunity. But his game also, like Seth Curry, actually, is very well tied to how many shots he gets and how many three-pointers of them go in. Because Marcus doesn't do much else besides that. I mean, he'll rebound, 4 or 5 a game, something to that effect. With Lopez, he's trending down, but we actually saw sort of an anomalous low in blocks this year. That's a number that could bounce back regardless of his age increasing. He took fewer threes and increased his field goal percent this year, which I actually liked because three-pointers are so easy to get in the NBA nowadays. And he'll just sort of quietly bumble along at like a top 90 clip, which, I mean, of everybody on this page, Batum and Brook Lopez are probably the only two I can point at to say those guys will, as if they're getting a starting gig, which I think they both will this year, they'll be inside the top 100. The rest of these guys, I don't think there's any guarantee that that actually shakes out. And finally, the middle one, which I promised I would loop back to, Joe Ingles had an historically great shooting season this last year, did slow as the year went on. I think he finishes more in the top 120 range. Ricky Rubio is in a full-on mentor role. I don't even think he'll be on the Cavs by later in the season. I like he'll be bouncing around as a backup point guard somewhere, but Darius Garland's the guy they want to be using there. And so I don't think either one of those guys posts useful 9-cat stuff, but I think Ingles has at least the night-to-night role guaranteed where, like, if you're in a 14-teamer, Joe's your guy. And that is my lightning round edition.
Yeah, and just to add on that, probably an additional incentive to get Joe Ingles, and probably one of your last pick is he's your handcuff for Mike Conley. So remember how good he is whenever Mike Conley goes down. So that's just like an additional. So I need you to really have a faster lightning round here.
Okay, I can go as
the,
fast as humanly possible on this one.
this one's gonna trend up and trend down analysis. So the first two rows is just those are old guys that I don't know what's gonna happen there, but you can put them into just one bucket because for me these are the only players that I think could actually have a good fantasy value just in case someone out of these threes could have that 30 plus minutes in terms of playing time. So first
Okay,
off, the Brooklyn front court.
Yeah. I think LaMarcus Aldridge compared to last year, which he basically didn't play after he was medically not cleared to, he's the only guy in that group I could see having any fantasy value for the greater portion of this year. I'm going no analysis here because I know we got to get through it.
Yo, sure.
Lakers, I will pass on all of them. I don't know that up or down is really even fair for them. I'm not interested in what they're selling. Conley, I'm going to say arrow straight across. He'll be the same this year as he was last season. Bledsoe, I'll go arrow up because he couldn't possibly care any less about what he was doing on a court than what was happening in New Orleans, even though I still don't think I'm taking a chance on him. Eric Gordon's probably getting moved this season at some point. So I think you kind of have to say arrow up because he wasn't really playing in Houston and he's always hurt, but I don't even know if I can put a direction on that. I absolutely hate Eric Gordon's fantasy game, but it couldn't be any worse than last year. So I guess that's up by default.
Yeah. Something that I would like to chime in there would be I think Wayne Ellington is a good add drop value, at least because I can't see anyone from the Lakers team that is better in outside threat among all of the wings that they have.
Yeah,
So,
he'll be a streamer probably level guy just because they have so many bodies they can rotate
yeah.
in.
Okay, so here it goes. Older ones.
Oh boy, Kevin Love, arrow down. He claimed he was going to play on the Olympic team, and they said he was too out of shape. Ouch. Colangelo twisting the knife. So no, he's. I don't even know if he's taking the floor this year until they cut him or get rid of him. The battle in the front office is already on. Bojan Bogdanovic. That's a weird one, man. I'm going to go slightly arrow up on him. He showed flashes last year, and we know that fit-wise, he does actually make a lot of sense there. But they're like his fantasy game. We've joked about having a boy on, which was like that game where he had 30-something points and zeros in every other category except for 3-pointers, I guess. Dragic hasn't been a fantasy asset in many seasons, so whatever. Like if he goes to Dallas, I guess he could be a little bit more relevant, but that's Luka's team. So no, I guess I'll say arrow down for him. Nemanja Bjelica. I can honestly tell you, I don't even know where he's at right now. He was in Miami at the end of last year.
He's currently in the Golden State Warriors.
Oh, yeah. No. He'll be better than he was with the Heat because they didn't even play him. He'll be worse than he was in Sacramento because they did play him a little bit.
I think in the first couple of weeks he's gonna have value just because Eric Pascal is gone and then Otto Porter is still out, and then he's kind of like could help out stretch some floor.
He's
So
gross. They'll play Juan Toscano Anderson for 4 big minutes, and I'll pass. The year of the Nemanja Bjelica voodoo doll jokes is now, I think, 2 years removed. And Danny Green, he actually ended up having a really good season last year that nobody talked about at all. He was inside the top 90 per game. He was better than that by totals, and his role should stay pretty similar. And if Ben Simmons is really sitting out, that's good. Anytime someone misses time, that's just a tiny bit more for Danny Green to do. So I'll say arrow flat or maybe even a tiny bit up. We will see who comes in, though. That could change my assessment on him.
yeah. Something that I would like to add here is for Boyan Bogdanovic. I think they got Jeff Green, right? So probably it's someone who could cut in his minutes. Oh no, Rudy Gay, not Jeff Green.
Oh
Okay.
boy. Derrick Rose, arrow down. Pat Beverly, arrow down. Jermichael Green, arrow down. Is that Gallo?
Yeah.
Gallo, arrow down. Hassan Whiteside, arrow up because he didn't play last year, so it's by default.
Okay. Actually,
Although Derrick Rose, I think, will belong on 14 teamers and might even creep near 12. The rest of these guys, I don't think, are even close to fantasy relevant.
agree. Something that attracts me here is Hassan Whiteside for deeper leagues because Derek Favors actually played between 15 minutes to 19 minutes, and I guess if he continuously play like that around those minutes, he could really provide some value in deep leagues. So that's something that I would expect from Hassan Whiteside. So actually, that's it for this super fast session. I'm gonna let you, do your shout out if there's something you want to really call out. Hoop ball, this HB360 and Aaron Bruce top 150 is about to be out, right, in a couple of days.
Yeah, Brewski 150 drops in 20 days, but I would just ask folks, please do give me a follow on Twitter. Everything we do, I try to make folks aware of on social media, and check out Fantasy NBA Today. I would love to have anyone who's interested as a listener. And thank you. I'm so sorry that I have to run here and had to go so fast. This was a blast, and thank you. And as my time frees up, I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. We need more time, right, to really,
I
to
talk too much. I know.
Yeah, actually, I also talk too much. I just let you handle this episode. Just last 3 more questions, super quick. On top of your mind, number one breakout player for this season.
Number one. I gotta mull that one over. I'll drop it on Twitter for you.
Sure. How about the number one player on top of your mind that will have a bounce back season?
Jaren Jackson Jr. And you can tell Jonas Nader I said it.
Yeah, he'll be here next couple of weeks, so I'll definitely tell him that. The player that you won't even touch this season,
There's
aside
no
from
one.
Kawhi.
There's no one. I mean, everything comes down to value. If someone drops far enough, you take them.
Excellent. And lastly, I know this is something that you're started to really be more familiar of, but who is your favorite rookie for this season.
The only one I know is Cade Cunningham, so it's got to be
Yeah.
Cade.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dan. I know you need to run another task. You have like a lot of things happening there. So thank you so much for dropping by. Again, guys, follow Dan at Dan Besbris at Twitter. He'll definitely, he's super active there. If you have any questions, just comment out and he'll definitely reply. So that's it for today. Thank you so much. Again, I'm your Fantasy Papi, Papi Roy. Like, subscribe, follow, share, comment. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Teacher, and Periscope at Twitter. So thank you so much, guys, and thank you so much. Dan, Best Priest, what up? Bye.